Hi, this is Justin Johnson, and this is the Working Man's Worship.
When I'm really struggling, you never see the pain. But when I start to healing, then the pain is everything on God. Pain is everything on God. This is what I came for. A sacrifice and I serve it every day. Do you really want a servant that's just perfect in the way on God?
There are individuals in life that when you just hear the sound of their voice, you know that they're going to have an impact on you. The first time I walked into City Light Church, I wasn't even sure if I wanted to go. I had just got into town the night before and gotten in late, and I had no idea what I was about to experience. The only thing I could think when I walked in that building is, man, they are rocking. This is a church? All right, let's see what this thing's all about. The worship team did amazing. Pastor's message was exactly what I needed to hear. But the person I introduced to you today is an individual that was speaking at the moment that I felt God, or the presence of God in my life. And for the first time in my life, I knew it was time to give my life to God. Stephen Mason is an amazing individual with an amazing story. Not only the obstacles that he's overcame, but the person he is every single day that you see him. You can almost always bet that his goal is to make your life better every time you see him. He always greets you with a smile. He always cares. He's very considerate when you speak. He's insanely busy, and you'll see why. This is the pastor that was praying when I gave my life to God, and the pastor that dunked me in the water, not once, but twice for baptism. The pure presence of God is what truly exceptionalizes Stephen Mason from other individuals. And he is not too proud to humble himself at God and God's will. And I just want to say thank you, Stephen, for taking the time to speak with other people like you have me. And that's what this working man's worship is all about.
So my name's Stephen Mason. I'm a person in long-term recovery from substance abuse, illicit and pharmaceutical drugs. I'm also a faithful follower of Christ, and I pastor the campus in Monteagle of City Light Church. I'm also the executive director of Mosaic Recovery Center. I was an addict, and I remember crying out to God in a jail cell, and in that moment I believe God started to change me. 4 days later, I was out of jail, and I was on my way to Memphis Recovery Center in Memphis, Tennessee. Supernaturally, I had been given something inside of me, had been placed that allowed me to be honest and willing and forthright, and everything changed.
I mean, what got you into recovery?
Growing up, a lot of people in my family were addicted to drugs or alcohol, which alcohol is a drug. You know, I saw it growing up. I saw the consequences of it. I didn't want anything to do with it. But when my friends started dabbling in it, maybe I believed that I was going to be smarter than my parents. I was going to somehow dabble in this party lifestyle but not end up like them. What really happened was I ended up worse than them. My dad was in and out of prison my whole life, and my mom worked 2 jobs. One of those was at the bar, and in the small town that I grew up in back in the 90s, you could take your kid to work if you worked at a bar. And so I grew up singing karaoke songs, Bob Seger, Bon Jovi in the bar, and playing their slot machines and different things like that. So I saw a lot growing up in regards to addiction. It was kind of easy when my friends started dabbling in the drug world. I kind of had that edge because I knew about it. I knew what the substances were, what they did. I knew how to get them and had access to them, and that made me feel like the man. I got attention from a lot of people. That was kind of my persona that I put on, but the reality was that when I started using different substances, I started falling in love with them and became addicted very quick. Can remember being just as addicted as anybody ever was at 16 on cocaine. And substances got worse. Things that I was doing to get them got worse. Was selling drugs, breaking into houses, stealing from people that I loved and genuinely did love them, but I was afraid of being sober at that point. And 5 felonies later, I'm staring down the barrel of 13 years in prison. And I had no other choice but to get clean or die. I remember thinking, well, if I could just get in treatment, I might be okay. I might be able to get a handle on this, but I didn't know anything about treatment. I didn't know anything about addiction other than I was an addict. And I remember crying out to God in a jail cell. Didn't even know if God was real. In fact, my prayer was, God, I don't know if you're real, but if you are, I don't believe that you like me very much. And I don't believe I've ever given you a reason to like me. But if you're real, I need you to change me right now. And I'm the one that's broken in this situation. It's not my circumstances. It's not my parents' fault. It's me. Something is fundamentally broken inside of me because I want to stay sober. I've tried to stay sober, and every time I come in contact with the opportunity to use drugs, I blow it. And in that moment, I believe God started to change me. 4 days later, I was out of jail. I was supposed to be going to prison for 13 years. 4 days later, I was out of jail, and I was on my way to Memphis Recovery Center in Memphis, Tennessee. And by the time I got there, supernaturally, I had been given something inside of me, had been placed that allowed me to be honest and willing and forthright, and everything changed.
When I'm really struggling, you never see the pain. But when I start to healing, then the pain is everything on God. Pain is everything on God. This is what I came for. Sacrifice and I serve it every day. Do you really want a servant that's just perfect in the way on God?
As men, we don't open up. We don't talk about things. And all of these men that I put in front of you are men who, to me, are not only exceptional human beings, but exceptional men of God. Had I had something like this going through my news feed or my news reels, I think I would have come to God a lot sooner. But I know everything happens in God's time. It is really all about men opening up about the most personal relationship that you can have in life. I have some amazing men that are going to speak to you that have allowed God to transform their lives and affect people like me and you. I've always wanted to have the Spirit of God in my life, have the presence of God in my heart, and the discipline to do right. So God sent me a Calvary of good men to show me exactly what the requirements of God and His good work really is. And thank you for being a follower of God and a leader amongst men. God bless.
When I go all the way, and nothing stops. I can't stop until everything is burned to the ground.
When I'm really struggling, you never see the pain. But when I start to healing, then the pain is everything on God. Pain is everything on God. This is what I came for. Sacrifice and I serve it every day. Do you really want a servant that's just perfect in the way on God?
Did you ever go back after you went into recovery?
To drugs?
Mm-hmm.
No. I've been sober February 14th, 2016, since that day. I've not had a mind or mood altering substance. I've been blessed to even having broken bones in recovery, having dental surgery. I've never had to take an opioid prescription, anything like that. I have friends that have, and they've stayed sober through it with accountability and wisdom and the power of the Holy Spirit. But I haven't yet. I actually have a surgery coming up July 2nd, and opioids are off the table for that too.
Well, so do you think it was more of a, when you kind of spoke to God, even at the time of not knowing that He's real, was it more of a Hail Mary thing? Was it hey, I need I need a favor, or like I'm lost, I don't know what to do, like?
Yeah, maybe a Hail Mary. In the football sense, maybe not in the Catholic sense.
Right.
But yeah, Hail Mary for sure. It was my last chance. I had tried willpower And it was like trying to heal cancer with willpower. It just wasn't going away.
Right.
And I had tried different substances. I had tried just drinking. I had tried to make myself just abstinent and not use anything. But like I said, I didn't have the faculties and the power within myself to say no. And so in that moment, I was giving God one chance. And that was the only chance.
Right.
Because I didn't have another chance.
Right.
I was going to go to prison for 13 years where when I was in jail, I was already arrested twice in the jail for aggravated assault, inciting a riot. I spent more time in solitary confinement that time than I did in the general population.
Right.
And so I was getting worse morally and psychologically without drugs and alcohol.
Right.
So by that time, I realized you take drugs and alcohol away, there's still a problem, Stephen.
Right.
And so because of the legal consequences that were bearing down on me, this was my only shot. And if I didn't get it right, I was probably going to join a gang in prison or get killed or get in the middle of something that I didn't need to be in the middle of. And I just wasn't going to make it. And I don't believe if I did go back to drugs and alcohol today that I would make it out.
Right.
Just based on all my past experience. When I go all the way.
Right.
And nothing stops. I can't stop until everything is burned to the ground.
Right.
So I won't have a job, I won't have a family, I won't have freedom, and I may not have my life.
Right.
So for me, it's just not an option. And so I couldn't say no to drugs, yet I've been sober for almost 10 years.
Which is awesome.
What I learned was I can't say no to drugs, and I still can't today within my own strength. But I can say yes to God, and I can accept His power, and I can walk in His authority. And now I don't think about getting high. I don't think about drinking. I don't struggle like I want to, I want to have, man, it's hot today. I want to have a beer. I don't have those thoughts anymore. He's taken that away from me, and I've been placed in a state of neutrality where I'm not tilting on one way or the other. If I'm confronted with the situation like narcotics for surgery or people drinking alcohol at dinner, I don't feel drawn to it anymore.
Like it's not even a complex at this point.
No.
It's just they're doing whatever they're doing and you're in another direction altogether.
Mm-hmm. And I'm content and happy. And that was my biggest problem. It wasn't that, the ultimate problem was I wasn't truly happy unless I was under the effect of drugs and alcohol.
Right.
And I was absolutely miserable in my own skin when I didn't have drugs and alcohol. You could put me in a war zone, and as long as I had a bottle of Percocet and some meth, I was good.
Right.
But you put me at a kid's birthday party, surrounded by family and friends, and I'm sober, and I've been sober for a few days, I'm absolutely miserable.
Right.
Absolutely miserable. And I don't know why. Now I know why. Because I had this void in me that only God could fill. Now I have that peace. Now I have that joy. Now I'm excited. I can't even sleep in the morning time. I wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning. I can't wait to get out of bed because I know I don't dread the day anymore. I'm excited about what God's got for me now.
When I'm really struggling, you never see the pain. But when I start to healing, then the pain is everything on God. Pain is everything on God. This is what I came for. A sacrifice and I serve it every day. Do you really want to serve it that's just perfect in the way on God?
Because now, man, I'm ready to charge hell with a wet towel.
When I'm really struggling, you never see the pain. But when I start to healing, then the pain is everything on God. Pain is everything on God. This is what I came for. A sacrifice and I serve it every day. Do you really want to serve it that's just perfect in the way on God?
I mean, you talk about how high speed, your addiction was. I see the same thing just in just in seeing you on a regular basis, like, dude, you're constantly doing stuff for Mosaic. You're constantly busy. You're constantly helping. When you get to church, you say hey to at least everybody, once. You know what I mean? And so, do you see that God's kind of used that drive, kind of high intensity part of yourself kind of to pull you over in a different direction at the same time?
He has changed so much about my personality. One thing that he did change, and I'll get to that in just a second, he changed, I couldn't speak in front of people. So if I was like trying to formulate a thought like we are right now, I would stutter, I would clam up, I would be, I couldn't get my thoughts out. Like I had stuff in here, but I just couldn't get it out here. Mm-hmm. And so I was very socially awkward. And that was another thing of why I used drugs and alcohol, because they made me feel like everybody else looked around me. Right. I felt comfortable. I could talk, man. I figured out, man, when I was high, I had a mouthpiece on me, And I think now that I'm saved, I'm sober, I'm filled with the Holy Spirit, like God has used me to be a voice for him. He's used me to talk many people off of many ledges. He's given me that clever, some of those clever things to say, but more than anything, he's given me the language of the heart. So now I can communicate my heart. I can communicate the ultimate truth to somebody, and everything that is true in them hears it. And we connect, and we're connected like that. I would say probably one of the things in my addiction was like I wasn't backing down from nothing. And so I think that that's something that God put in me for his glory, that would eventually be used for his glory. Because now, man, I'm ready to charge hell with a wet towel. Like, give me a squirt gun, I'm going after the devil, Right. I still have fears, but even when I have fears, like when I was afraid of somebody, like I would jump up and like try to fight them. Because I knew I was afraid of them, and I was more afraid of being dominated by that person. So now I'm afraid of failure in my career and with my family and parenting. Like, I thought I knew how to be married. I should have wrote a marriage book before I got married. Right. When I thought I knew everything there was to know about marriage. Same thing with parenting. I should have wrote a parenting book before I had kids, because I don't know nothing. And I'm afraid of failing. I'm afraid of not doing the right things. But because I'm afraid of those things, I'm like a bull. I just like attack it. And I think that's definitely something that God put in me, because that's not,
it's not typically a part of your, kind of original self.
Right, yeah.
How does the presence of God itself exist in your life? Like, you go from everything from people like, hey, I heard God speak to me, like these signs came about, like what some people call coincidences, which me personally, I don't believe are coincidences at all. Mm-hmm. I think there's very few coincidences in life, honestly.
Yeah.
But with that being the case, like what do you do at both as discipline, and what just naturally do you see in your life that gives you that presence of God?
Okay, so discipline, for whatever reason, my flesh only cares about what's entertaining and what's temporary, and what's pleasurable. Usually none of those things are what God is in. So discipline. Every day that I wake up, my heart is growing further away from Jesus. Naturally. That's just my fallen nature. My flesh wants what is temporary, what's pleasurable and entertaining. God is usually in none of those things. He is in what's eternal. He's in what's sacrificial. He's in what's painful. He brings us joy. He brings us peace. He brings us, there's fun stuff and all that. But God is not interested in me being entertained. He wants me to be overwhelmed by his presence. So I can get up and jump on Facebook. I can jump on TV. I can watch YouTube shorts. I can watch a podcast, different things like that. But if I will make myself press in and talk to God and wait on him to show up and really just let my desire grow for him in that moment, I will feel him walk into the space that I'm inhabiting. And we're cohabiting in that moment together. The Bible will call it tabernacling. The tabernacle was the place where God's presence would meet with man. And so that's available to me every day. That's the discipline part of it. If I want to know more about God, then I have to read his word, and I have to sit under preaching. I have to worship. And that's just the discipline part of it. But what happens supernaturally without me doing anything, is just being available to be used by God. Oftentimes, I've had all kinds of supernatural experiences. So I was going to get this tattoo. It's my wife's name. It's on my ring finger. The Bible says when a man finds a wife, he finds a good thing. And I know people have different opinions about tattoos and different things like that. And we could definitely get into that if in the comment section. But the thing about it is, I was on my way to the tattoo shop, and my son Jonah's with me. We go to the ATM. There's a guy there. He's got such a laser focus in his eyes. He's got no tattoos. He doesn't look like a rock star, collared shirt buttoned up, you know. I just have this overwhelming feeling like the laser focus in that guy's eyes tell me that he's a musician. And I said, man, that's a weird thought to have based on the data that I've gathered in this moment. So immediately I open myself up and say, God, are you giving me a word of knowledge about this guy? Something that you're telling me about this guy that I couldn't otherwise know because I've never met him. I don't know anybody that knows him. I don't know him, you know? Right. And so I didn't want to be wrong and scare him away from God by saying, hey, God's telling me that you play music, you know, you play instruments, and him be like, I can't play the radio, you know? Right. So I said, well, there's no harm in asking him. And if it's a no, then I just look like a weirdo. Right. And, you know, I've looked like a weirdo for worse. Yeah, right. You know, right. Hopefully. Right. I said, man, do you play an instrument? And he said, yeah. And I said, what instrument do you play? He said, I actually play like 7 instruments. And so I'm like, boom, Lord speaking to me. So I said, well, here's the deal, man. I said, when I saw your eyes, something told me that you play instruments, and I believe it's God trying to tell me to tell you something, which is this. And I just kind of became an instrument in that moment. I just let flow whatever came out of my mouth at that point. And I said, I believe God's wanting to tell you that he's called you, gifted you with that talent, called you to usher in his presence through musical worship on a Sunday morning there at a church. And his jaw dropped. And he immediately looks at me and he says, man, this is the craziest thing. He said, I just had a church ask me less than 7 days ago to come play with them. I never go to church. I don't go to church. And so I think about that, and I think about, what are the mathematical odds? What if MIT actually added up how many days I would live on this earth, how many days on average he would live, how many different locations we could have been in that day based on his work schedule, based on my car path, and all the thoughts that could have popped into my head when I saw that guy. But this was the thought, in this moment, that is too odd not to be God. Right. And so, you know, my life is full of those things, you know, where God speaks to me and tells me, Stephen, everything I have for you is good. And I'm walking through an airport and I immediately just start weeping because I don't know, I've never heard the audible voice of God before. And now I'm hearing it and I'm wondering, is this because the plane's about to go down? Like, what are you prepping me for, you know? And just to find out like something life-altering was going to happen to me just moments later. And God reminding me of what he had just supernaturally spoken to me when he said, everything that I have for you is good. And then to watch God walk me through this path where he makes everything better than I could ever imagine. Right. You know, where people walk out of my life and he's reminding me like, hey, I've got your back and I'm going to bring people who are 10 times more supportive, 10 times, you know, more trustworthy, 10 times more, you know, that are for you and not for themselves. And so, you know, my life is full of those crazy, weird, spooky, supernatural moments.
When I'm really struggling, you never see the pain. But when I start to healing, then the pain is everything on God. Pain is everything on God. This is what I came for. A sacrifice and I serve it every day. Do you really want a servant that's just perfect in the way on God?
If I don't believe the gospel of Jesus Christ, the Bible, it's because I investigate it, and everyone should investigate it. You should investigate it. And I disagree with it. In other words, I think I could do better with humanity than the God of the Bible. If I disagree with what the Bible says, sure. If I disagree with what Jesus said, I think that I, in my disagreement, am a better God than or at least could fathom a better God than this God.
When I'm really struggling, you never see the pain. But when I start to healing, then the pain is everything on God. Pain is everything on God. This is what I came for. A sacrifice and I serve it every day. Do you really want a servant that's just perfect in the way on God?
What do you think keeps people away from God?
I think self. You know, it's funny that you brought up faith. As a person in recovery, a person who struggled with addiction for over 10 years, I figured out once I got sober, and I didn't figure it out, somebody taught me that I was a person of faith in my addiction. Even though I claimed to be an atheist at times, claimed to be an agnostic most of the time, and I had a lot of stock in science and things like that. In order to use drugs, you gotta have a lot of faith.
Yeah.
You gotta believe what you're putting in your body is what the person selling you says it is. I would
Right.
get ripped off, take the fake pills, they wouldn't do anything, and then I'd take the rest of them, hoping it would do something, you know, desperate. I had desperate faith, you know. A guy sold some stuff that looked like meth one time. I'm pretty sure it was wasp spray, and I smoked it, got sick, threw up, passed out, woke up the next day, couldn't find any real stuff, used it again, you know. And so, I mean, I'm putting my faith in something that doesn't work, you know. And so we do it every day. We do it every time that we get in a car. Especially,
that was
you know,
an example I was going to say. Every time we drive a vehicle, we have faith it's going to work.
you turn the key, you have faith it's going to work. I turn this light switch, I got faith it's going to turn off the lights, you know. So we exercise our faith every day, you know. And people say, oh, well, you know, what if people just can't come to the place where they believe? It's not a belief issue. It's not a faith issue. It's a desire issue. If I don't believe the gospel of Jesus Christ, the Bible, it's because I investigate it, and everyone should investigate it. You should investigate it. And I disagree with it. In other words, I think I could do better with humanity than the God of the Bible. If I disagree with what the Bible says,
True.
if I disagree with what Jesus said, I think that I, in my disagreement, am a better God than, or at least could fathom a better God than this God. That's why every person is held accountable. That is why putting our faith in Jesus and following Christ is the determining factor of where we spend eternity. And so sin demands justice. Crimes demand justice. And we do it all the time. Every time when it's for ourselves, we should say, oh, well, I shouldn't have to put my faith in Jesus because I'm a decent person. Yeah, everybody messes up. So I should just get grace. Here's the thing. God is fully just and fully merciful. And so he looked at our sin, every single one. And I've sat in enough AA meetings and heard enough people share their junk to know everybody has had horrible thoughts and everybody has done horrible things.
Right.
Horrible, socially unacceptable things. Everybody. Not just alcoholics, everybody.
Right.
I've seen enough pastors fall. I've seen enough marriages crumble. I've seen enough business owners get arrested and go to prison. But the truth is, we've all done stuff. We've all fallen short of the glory of God. And there is a court in heaven that is looking to with scales, saying the scales must tip justified. But here's the thing. God sent his son, looked at us in love and said, yes, I have to pour out my wrath on sin in order to be a just God. But I love my children. And so I'm going to send my own son to die in their place. Now the debt has been paid. You know, if I got a $100,000 bond and I'm in jail and you try to pay it and I say, no, I don't accept it, I'm still going to be in jail. But if I accept the bond, I'm free, right? If I let you pay my debt, then you pay my debt and I get to walk away free. And so that's what the Bible says when it talks about justified. We are justified through Christ. So now when God sees us, he doesn't see our sin, he sees his son. Now, when he sees me, it's justified, never sinned. Does that make sense? You know, you bring up a good question. Is it people still are just too self-reliant? Ultimately, yes. Because they, somewhere in their flesh, they believe that they would make a better world than God has.
Okay. Okay. And that makes a lot of sense. Being somebody who for a long time in life, I openly claimed agnostic and atheist, and, completely was, there was a time where I was mad at Christianity. It's one thing that I did is I looked into a lot of world religions. I mean, even some that were more of lifestyle oriented and social oriented, and some of them that were purely, spiritual and religious. And in talking to a lot of people and stuff, and this is, why I wanted to start, doing these and talking to a lot of people, I found most people have most people have, even those that say, I don't believe in anything, or I don't have, any faith, or nothing's real, or maybe something's real, but I don't know. Most of them still have this kind of inkling. It's like an internalized thing within us as spiritual beings, regardless of your belief. We're all spiritual beings. Very few people disagree with that. Everybody thinks that there's some spiritual realm.
There's some energy, there's vibrations,
Right.
Yeah.
And so I feel like, for me personally, the power of what Jesus did and the perfection in the way he did it, both, not only, on the sacrificial end, but like you mentioned it at church, and it stuck with me ever since, mentioned at church that time about servitude. Like, it's not sacrifice, it's servitude. If you want to do it and you're doing it, don't look at it as a sacrifice. Look at it as service, because that's what it actually is. Like, by definition, you can say, well, this was hard, I didn't want to do it, but you did want to do it, you did it, and that's what makes it servitude. And I think that's the beauty in reading the New Testament, reading like the words he actually said to people, is he wasn't this like super passive, like, I'm just going to walk away guy. He was like a full-blown revolutionary that was like, there is a bigger purpose than the coins we spend and the land we have and the governments we build. Like, it is all for the glory of God. That's what we were given the opportunity to do. How do you build a deeper relationship with Christ? Of course, the easy answer is like read your Bible, worship, so on and so forth. But the question, that question, and then to piggyback off of that is, how do you build that deeper relationship with Christ? And then, even as importantly, you mentioned worship. How do you worship?
With you have such an entrepreneurial spirit. Like you're a grinder. You're a drop me off in the middle of, Tennessee in a new place, or Memphis, and like you build things, and it's very apostolic in nature, where, one of the members of the ecclesia, which was the Greek word for church back then, when Jesus coined the word church, it was ecclesia in the Greek, which really was a governmental term. One of the members of that party of government were an apostle, and they would go into an area and they would establish, so they would say, okay, here's where the tax collector booth's going to be. Here's where the preacher's going to go. And the preacher would stand at the busy point of the town, and they would cry out and yell and wail about all the great things that Rome was going to do now that Rome had conquered this nation. Right. So the army would go in and conquer it. Then they would send the ecclesia in to change it and make it a Roman country. I just see that about you, and I think about, like sovereignly God would have guided you to him, his son Jesus, no matter what, because, as somebody like you looks at Jesus, you see a man who conquered the world without an army.
Right.
And that's so impressive. Like, this dude did what Napoleon couldn't do, what Genghis Khan couldn't do, what Alexander the Great, who went before him, couldn't do. And he never lifted a finger against anybody. But he literally conquered the world, and that's what he said. Jesus said, there will be trouble, but don't despair, because I have overcome the world. But you asked, the question of how does one grow in their relationship with Jesus? So for me, I don't read my Bible enough. I don't pray enough. I'm not disciplined enough spiritually, right? But because my flesh wants what's temporal, wants what's now, what's pleasurable, right? So I'm constantly fighting that, because my spirit is a part of me, but so is my flesh. Until the day that I die, my flesh is going to be present. So there's going to be that battle. But I think about this incredible conqueror, Jesus. I think about God the Father who spoke maybe one word and the whole universe was created. And that universe was endless, yet that universe is getting bigger by the moment. So we can't measure the expanse of the universe, yet the universe endlessness is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. I go to the Bible and I look at that Bible as if it's not just a book, because once you go to seminary, you start studying the Bible, you realize you cannot get to the bottom of the Bible. I can get to the bottom of any book that any man has written. This is not a natural book. It's endless. Right. It's bottomless. It's ever expanding, just like the word that God spoke when he spoke the universe. Now it's the Bible. I look at that Bible and I think, okay, I'm going into this. I need you, Holy Spirit. Right. I'm diving into this supernatural book that God's about to speak to me through in so many different ways. And I can read the same verse and it's going to say something to me different every single day. Right. And I think about that God and how when I was a liar, when I was a thief, when I was lustful, when I was angry, when I was bitter, when I was so selfish, that I would steal from people who worked hard for the stuff that they had, just so I didn't have to be dope sick. That's how selfish I was. I look at how God looked at me and said, that God looked at this guy who was this guy and said, that's who I pick.
Right.
And man, that alone, that truth.
That's beautiful.
It fires me up and it gets me to where, I'm like, okay, I'm deleting Facebook off my phone. I'm spending time with you this morning, Lord. And when I haven't been spending time with him, or I've been treating him like a cosmic vending machine, where it's like, okay, I want healthy kids. I don't want to be broke. So I do these things so that I get what you are going to give me, Lord. And I get off track. So I'm still in relationship with God. I'm just not in proper relationship with him, because he wants to be my father and he wants me to be his son. Right. And so we're bond servants, but we're also sons and daughters. And so he wants to be the one who sustains me. He wants to be, and he is. And so when I can press past this flesh and I can push into the spirit, God has something there for me every single time. I never leave the Holy of Holies in my quiet time with God disappointed. Right. Never. And so that's what I do for my relationship. I've been really disciplined about, okay, I got to read this many chapters a day, or I got to spend this many hours a day in the Bible. And I can almost treat it like it's a habit. Right. But it's not a habit. It's me going into this place where God inhabits. And that's my relationship with God. So, everything else is icing on the cake. Right. When we go into, one of the greatest things about meeting with you is that we're meeting in the name of Christ, and he shows up. Right. And so he has something for us. The best thing about going and helping somebody, other than just finally being someone who can be useful to others, without some sort of grimy, sketchy motive of I'm going to get over on somebody, or I'm eventually going to blow this up by, just being a dirtbag, is the feeling that comes along, the presence of God. It's more than a feeling. It's the presence of God. And so, as far as I used to think that my worship had to be, okay, I have to do this, I have to do this, I have to do this. Now I know that this is him. I'm basically, without him, I'm still that drug addict. I'm still that liar. I'm still that cheater. I'm still that awful person. I'm still that dude who's about to go and commit crimes. I'm still the guy who's looking out for himself all the time, no matter what, without him. And so I'll never forget that guy, because then I can say, but look who I am now.
Right.
Look who I am in Christ. And for me, my as far as I know, my grandparents saw their parents using drugs and alcohol.
Right.
My parents saw their parents using drugs and alcohol.
Right.
I saw my parents using drugs and alcohol.
Right.
Drunkenness, fights, DUIs, police raids, coming home, stuff's missing. My stuff's getting stolen, taken to the pawn shop. That's what I grew up in. That's what they grew up in. That's what they grew up in. And so now I wake up every morning, I go get me a cup of coffee, and I sit on my couch, and I think about how my kids have never seen me under the effect of drugs and alcohol. They've never seen me running from the cops. Right. They don't have to worry about their stuff coming up missing. Right. They don't have to worry about me getting hauled off to jail, not being home anymore. That generational curse is broken. And so, God could not, he could say, okay, I'm not releasing another blessing into your life, Stephen. And I've already had this conversation with God. God, you can give me stage 4 terminal cancer. You can give me whatever, do whatever you want to me. If it's going to serve my purpose in this earth, I'm ready for it, because there's nothing. When I look behind me, I see nothing but blessing after blessing after blessing after blessing. And so that alone is worth worshiping in this moment. And worship, in its essence, the first time worship is ever talked about is when Abraham is about to, and you knew that when you said it, didn't you?
Yeah.
The first time it's ever mentioned is when Abraham is about to go and sacrifice his son to God, because God has said, the son that I gave you, and the only son he's got.
Right.
Like this, the whole promise,
Like,
every
that
promise
was
he
tough.
ever give Abraham, I'm going to make your descendants as many as the stars in the sky. All of it's hanging on this kid. And now he's taking this kid up on the mountain, and Sarah asked, where are you going? And he said, me and Isaac are going up on the mountain to worship. He's about to put his son on the altar. A lot of people never see the fire of God fall because they don't want to make an altar and put a sacrifice on it. The fire always falls on the sacrifice. Anytime you read in the Old Testament, the fire of God, they would create this altar. They would put a sacrifice on it, something that cost them something. They would put it on the altar, and the holy fire of God would come down. And it wasn't about seeing fire come down from heaven, which that'd be pretty cool.
Right.
I mean, right? It was about encountering the God of heaven, because that experience would leave them forever changed. Every part, every crevice, everything in their lives would be completely different after that moment. What anybody wouldn't give for that moment, but few do experience that because they're too afraid to sacrifice. That's what worship is. And so without sacrifice, there is no worship.
Right.
We can sing songs, we can dance, we can shout, but if we're not truly, when we're truly worshiping, when we're sacrificing to God and being obedient to Him.
When I'm really struggling, you never see the pain. But when I start to healing, then the pain is everything on God. Pain is everything on God. This is what I came for. I sacrifice and I serve it every day. Do you really want a servant that's just perfect in the way on God?
It's faith, facts, and then feelings. And we put feelings last because you can't trust them jokers,
When I'm really struggling, you never see the pain. But when I start to healing, then the pain is everything on God. Pain is everything on God. This is what I came for. I sacrifice and I serve it every day. Do you really want a servant that's just perfect in the way on God?
What gets the answers for you when you're struggling with any decision? What helps you make that decision?
I think it's one day at a time. It's one decision at a time. We rarely have the destination already in mind of where God's going to take us. We just have that first step. And the first step always sucks, usually. It's like, if it's the God thing, it's the hard thing. God had been walking me through recovery myself. He'd been walking me into this career of helping others with the Department of Mental Health and Substance Abuse. I'd been working for the Franklin County Prevention Coalition as a overdose prevention specialist and a certified peer recovery specialist for a couple of years. And I had a 1-bedroom apartment. All my bills were paid. I had a nice car. I didn't own it, but the bank owned it, but I was making the payments on it. You know, I was living what I only could imagine I could live in that moment. Again, 1-bedroom apartment, single, got a car, got a nice job. I remember we were planning Mosaic Recovery Center, and we knew that God had called us to build this program, and I was going to be a consultant, and I was going to volunteer, and I was going to help, and I was going to serve in that way. And I was going to keep my apartment, I was going to keep my job, I was going to keep all my free time because I could make my own schedule. I was going to keep the limited amount of responsibilities that I had. I was very comfortable. I was going to keep the salary that I had, and it wasn't going to cost me anything. You talk about calling and choices and things like that. Kenny calls me and says, okay, we've mapped it out. So, you know, we've already mapped it out. Me and him and a couple other people had sat down and kind of came up with a game plan. There was going to be one paid employee at Mosaic. He's going to have to live there, and he's going to be the only paid staff member, and he's basically going to have to run the program by himself with the help of Pastor Kenny part-time and the help of whatever volunteers that we didn't have yet.
Right.
You know, and however dedicated they were going to be, and we don't even know who they are yet.
Right.
And he calls me and he says, Stephen, I really feel like God's telling me to ask you to be the executive director and take that position. And I said, well, that would make me leave my job and lose my apartment and give up my schedule, give up my free time, take on this scary position that I've never done. I don't know if it's going to work, you know, and take less money,
right.
You know. So,
which is always a tough.
Just immediately a no, you know. So, I said, Pastor, I really appreciate you thinking of me, but yeah, I don't think I'm going to do it. And I said, because I don't feel led to do that.
Right.
So I tell Kenny no immediately. And I said, I don't feel led to do this. And usually if we're being led, we don't feel led. If we feel led, we're not being led, you know, because feelings ain't facts. It's faith. It's faith, facts, and then feelings. And we put feelings last because you can't trust them jokers, you know. If it's got a lot of money attached to it, I feel good about it.
Right.
If it doesn't, I don't feel good about it. He said, well, just do this, pray about it. And that was the mistake I made. So I pray and I tell God, I actually sit down at my desk, which I did a lot of prayer there, a lot of Bible study there. Mm-hmm. I was in Bible college at the time. That's where I would go, and I get on my laptop and I do my lessons, and man, I just loved it. I loved learning about the Bible, loved, you know, getting that stuff. And that was my prayer closet basically. And so I made a list of all the things that I was about to give up if I said yes to this. And I said, God, these are blessings that you've given me, and I don't want to give them up just because this guy who carries the title of my pastor has asked me to do this. Right. And God said, you know, Stephen, all those blessings are in your hands, and I'm never going to pry them out of your hands. If you close your hands on them, what's going to happen is they're going to wither away and die, because every blessing has an expiration date. But if you'll hold your hands open, I'm going to take those things out and I'm going to put better things in. And I look at that and I look at I think about calling, and I think about that moment, because I was single. I had a little Buick Regal. I had a 1-bedroom apartment. Right. And I had my salary, and I thought that was as good as it could get. And I thought, if I say yes to this, I'm basically going to the cross. But the promised land always looks like sacrifice. Right. You know, in order for them to get out of Egypt, they had to go through the parted waters, and it looked dangerous, and it looked like they were going to be killed, and it looked like their life was going to end as they knew it. And even if it was successful, life as they knew it was ending. Right. They were going to the wilderness. They were going to have to rely on God, trust God. But that's what we're called to do. And my life now is, as you can see, I'm not living in a 1-bedroom apartment anymore. Right. I have a family. I have a wife. I have people who count on me, who I can be, useful to. It was after that we started Mosaic that things started lining up in my spiritual life like I never thought they could. Stuff started lining up in my career like I never thought it could. I became a pastor after that. I've traveled the world, preaching the gospel, seen thousands of people saved. Thousands of people saved. I've seen people get out of wheelchairs who were paralyzed and walk. I've seen crazy supernatural things, and I became a parent. I mean, that's in itself one of the most incredible things that I could have ever experienced. But I didn't know how good it could get. I just thought it was as good as it could get. So there was moments of prayer and many moments of begrudging servitude after that. I don't want to do this. This is scary. This doesn't feel good. I think that this is going to fail. And Mosaic's one of the most successful recovery programs around. But I thought it was going to fail for at least the first 2 or 3 years. No, probably not 3 years, but at least the first year.
Right.
I thought this thing is for sure going to tank. And that's what calling is. It's scary. It's not comfortable, but it's better. He is able to do exceedingly and abundantly more than we can ask or think. Mm-hmm. It's literally saying, if you can imagine it, it's not as good as God can make it.
When I'm really struggling, you never see the pain. But when I start to healing, then the pain is everything on God. Pain is everything on God. This is what I came for. A sacrifice and I serve it every day. Do you really want a servant that's just perfect in the way on God?
And that's what happens when someone truly comes under the lordship of Jesus Christ.
When I'm really struggling, you never see the pain. But when I start to healing, then the pain is everything on God. Pain is everything on God. This is what I came for. A sacrifice and I serve it every day. Do you really want a servant that's just perfect in the way on God?
I hope that people watch this channel and they see your heart for real faith, honest seeking of Jesus. I think that there's people that will only bite through something like this. And so I hope people get a lot out of it. And you're just real and have a real personality. You keep it real.
Man, I was just always that kind of person. Like, if I didn't know, I was going to ask. I came to God in a pretty supernatural way. And I honestly, when I ask, I kind of ask out of spite because I was completely unnerved in the position I was in at the time. And I was like, all right, well, look, here's the deal. God or the devil, I don't care. Whichever one of y'all wants to move this rock, move this rock. I was like, going to ask God first. And I asked him, and it's like the rock moved. You know what I mean? And it was like, so
I got chills.
It was within seconds of me asking. I was like, all right, cool. I'll figure it out on the other side.
Yeah.
And that's what brought me to God. And that's why I want to, do this for people. All I've ever done in my life is work. I actually used to say to her a lot of times, like, the most personal thing you can do is business. And that's as far as I'm letting myself live. Like, I'm not letting myself have faith. I'm not letting myself have a relationship with humans, let alone God. I'm not letting myself have a relationship with myself, because if it's not business, it's irrelevant.
Wow.
So I'm handling my own life, my own feelings, my own worth, anybody else's own worth, like a stock exchange. A lot of it was out of trying to help other people, but I'm a person that's always been a problem solver. And that's why the sacrifice servitude thing means so much to me. I didn't do anything for myself. Still the same exact results. Miserable, unhappy, unhinged, on the other side of, life, like absolutely in a rut. For me, that's what I try and want to have other people have, is your story, another person's story, because the thing that really got me when I came to church was it was completely the opposite that I expected. It was welcoming. And, that was a day that, I raised my hand at the end and gave my life to God. I was like, this is it. Like, that's what you were leading me towards. She had to convince me that Sunday morning.
You take your business, your music stuff, social media stuff, marketing stuff, and all this stuff, and you give that to Jesus.
Yeah.
And you say, I'm doing this for you now.
Yeah.
And then you name your podcast or your YouTube channel Working Man's Worship. But work is your sacrifice, because that was your idol.
Yeah.
And so you took this and said, here you go, God.
Yeah.
And wow, man, that is so cool. So cool.
That's what I came for.
Yeah, you said that's like me, you know, that's the most personal thing you could do is business.
Yeah.
And it's like, here, God, here's my business. You know, wee man in a tree, you know. But he was also like a gangster. Right. He was a strong-armed robber.
Right.
Like he would seize people and take their money. Christ came to him and said, I'm having dinner at your house tonight. And he had that encounter with Christ. And it's so funny. That was the first thing he wanted to give up. The thing that he held the most valuable. And that's what happens when someone truly comes under the lordship of Jesus Christ. Right. Not, oh, Jesus is, you know, my friend or whatever. No, Jesus, you are my Lord. You are the king of my life. You are the CEO of everything that is in my stock. And, you know, Peter was hunting fish. As soon as Christ came to him, they left the nets, they left the boats, they left the fish and followed him. The woman at the well who had 5 husbands, and Jesus came to her and she had that encounter with Christ. She left her water pots at the well and ran to tell everybody about Jesus and said, you know, come see a man who told me everything that I ever did. All he said was, you got 5 husbands. But right. She's wondering, how can this guy know? You know, when we get personal with Jesus and he gets personal with us, then, you know, that's the first thing that we want to do. And, you know, drugs were my idol and my master. And they were a terrible God.
Well, and that's what I found, you know, with work and money and business. And, you know, I mean, the truth of the matter is all of my major failures in life, which include, you know, drugs, women, alcohol, money, like every single one of them came with work is my God. Whatever gets this accomplished, whatever gets this done. What's the risk we have to take? And then immediately you're in a situation that you didn't even know you were in. Craziest thing was like, and you messed up the plan. Like, not only are you destroying me as a human being, but you messed up the plan too. Just blindly, I just like, you know, up until now, when I see a difference, like you talked about having a difference, like I see a difference in you. I spoke to her the other night. I was like, there's 2 things I've never had in my life. That's discernment and boundaries.
Yes.
Like 100%. I was like, the 2 things I've never had in my life are boundaries and discernment. So once you open yourself up, you know, to the Lord, to God, to faith, to commitment, to discipline, you start to see the world. It's not like the world really changes. It's like the world changes within you. And your perspective of the world drastically changes. Things that weren't important before, you're like, oh, that is important. Kindness. Being a complete business person, like I used to tell people, like, hey, I'm an a-hole. That's what you need to know about me. If you can deal with that, we'll succeed at whatever you want to do. Doesn't matter. Dude, one of the most important things to me now is, am I kind? You know, I say a prayer for me and the kids and the family over dinner, and I'm like, remind us to be the best versions of ourselves and be kind and share the love of Jesus through anything we do. And sometimes I even get caught up on it, but it's like, that's a big one for me. And it's not a bad one for anybody. Be kind and love through God, you know? It's really amazing. And that's why I wanted to, like, in digging, I've thought about this for the last couple of months. I'm like, who do I want to speak to first? And that's why I wanted to sit down with you first. And you know,
I'm first.
Yeah, man.
Well, I'm honored. This just confirms to me that I am as important as I thought I was. You know, so.
Well, the big thing for me is you know, you said that prayer that Sunday, and that meant a lot to me, of course. And Joey was playing behind you. I went to raise my hand. I was like, nah, it's all right. I'm going to do this another time. And I was like, somebody comes by here, because I kept it up for maybe a good, like, 10, 15 seconds. I was like, God, nobody picked me yet, you know. And I was like, all right, well, maybe next time. And I put my hand down, and I actually talked to God. I was like, if somebody comes over here and taps my hand, I'm ready to do this thing. And you know, of course, somebody did, and they handed me a card. I filled it out. I got the box and everything, and the mug, which the mug is a good one.
Oh, it's a
The
great
mug's
mug.
awesome.
Yeah.
But the
Nothing
important
like
thing
being
was-
mugged by a Christian.
Right. So the important thing was, though, I felt a comfort in coming to you and talking to you about it afterward. I don't know what I'm doing, but I felt a genuine presence of God when I talked to you. So when I was kind of like going through the scales of like, hey, you know, who do I want to really have the first good sit down with? And I was like, Stephen.
Okay.
Stephen, period. The way that you affect people through the way you talk is absolutely amazing.
Well, it can only go up from here.
That's it. That's it.
The interviews can only get better. The people you interview can only get better from here.
Thank you for being here and doing this podcast with me for Working Man's Worship. All the stuff that you do, you know, with Mosaic, with the church, with all of us at the church and everything else, man, it's amazing.
Well, thank you for lowering your standards enough to let me be on your podcast.
Fair enough. You're awesome,
Absolutely.
man.
When I'm really struggling, you never see the pain. But when I start to healing, then the pain is everything on God. Pain is everything on God. This is what I came for. A sacrifice and I serve it every day. Do you really want a servant that's just perfect in